And again, people continue to hang on to the painted nails, sort of these outside things, the appearance, and then the crying comes up too. It's all under these sideshow things, you know. And Pete Prisco, who has covered the league for 30 years?
Long time.
Over
covering the league,
years?
I think, when Johnny the Good Kid was down in Jacksonville. I think that's where they met, right?
Yes. And he's very good at what he does. But there are still old school guys like him. There are still guys like, and Potsy commented on the link to my column saying, like, this is a straw man argument about the painted nails where just a few people on Twitter are commenting about the nails. And I don't, like, there are callers who call in about this stuff, whether it is a loud minority, but, like, there are people who cover the league who has cited this sort of stuff, crying, the intangible stuff like this that make them worry. And I think it's so nonsensical. So I'll let you hear what Pete Prisco had to say with Carmen and Yurko just a couple of hours ago.
Yurko, I got to ask you something. Did you ever cry after a football game where you just lost the game?
No.
Or you know, you might have cried, like, if, God forbid, if a family member passed away or something and it was emotional or something. I get it from that standpoint. But from a win-lose perspective, did you ever cry?
Never. Anger, frustration, maybe, but never tears in the eyes.
But what does it say that he did? What does that really say? Is that's a negative? I mean, if he's
To me, it
emotional?
Yeah, well, being emotional is one thing, but I'm with Yurko. I think, you know, I can go back to when I was, 9 years old playing. I didn't cry over anything. I just didn't. I didn't.
Kids cry over. They strike out and they cry.
When you were
Pete,
kids, though, when the Bears lost when I was a kid, I cried. And I'd swear at the television, and my father kicked me out. But at some point, you don't cry over anything.
It's particularly a winner. If, like I always say, and I've said this many a year, and you guys have probably heard me say that, if the worst thing that ever happens to you in your life is you lost a football game, you had a hell of a damn life.
But I don't think at that point you're categorizing the bad things that have happened in your life. It's just an emotion. I cried when we lost to Centerville my senior year. We were the number one team in all of the United States in high school football. We lost in the first round of the playoffs in a pouring rainstorm. And I had a ball go right through my hands early in that game that could have been a touchdown, slipped right through my fingers. I cried like a baby.
Yeah, many of the college players in the NCAA tournament this year, when they got eliminated, cried. He's a college kid, and even if you're a pro, look, what does it matter if Travis Kelce in the Super Bowl this year had a whole thing with his coach, pushed his coach? Is that better?
It's an acceptable emotion.
What's more acceptable? What I cite again, and what does it take away from him that he cried after the game was over? It didn't affect his performance. What I always cite from that game was, and Pete Prisco didn't talk about this at all, they played at the time the number 5 ranked Washington Huskies, the team that eventually went to the national championship game. They lost that game 52-42. Their defense allowed 52 points. In that game, Caleb Williams was 27 of 35 for 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also rushed for 1 touchdown. He accounted for 4 touchdowns and did not turn the ball over.
He was great.
But what are we citing? We're citing that he cried after the game. What are we doing here?
Well, we're not. We're not citing.
No, right.
I think the vast majority of people really don't care. Those that do, look, I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. You want to feel that way, feel that way. I would not factor into my evaluation of the player or the person any way, shape, or form. Now, if there were other things that were related to it, different story. I don't find that there is anything related to that. I didn't feel bothered by it then. I don't feel bothered by it now. If it gets your dander up, I'm okay. Doesn't bother me. I'm be thrilled to have him as our starting quarterback.
If you want to cite Caleb Williams holds on to the football too long and plays too much hero ball, and that needs to be corrected, amen. I'm with you.
Yeah.
If we want to talk about tangible stuff, that he'll need to correct to be a good quarterback, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here for finally the Bears getting it right at the quarterback position. But this talk about whether or not his nails or his lip gloss or his phone case, or if he cried after a game where he absolutely bawled out against the team that went to the national championship game, where his defense allowed 52 freaking points, and your talking point is that he cried, that's absolute nonsense. But let's talk about the stuff that he needs to improve on.
The thing that resonated most with me with what Pete had to say with Carmen and Yurko was that he feels that, and he said some very, flattering things about Caleb Williams, that if the Bears get the quarterback position right and Caleb Williams becomes the player that many think he can be, that they're going to be competing for Super Bowls for years to come, which to me is a much more important conversation than the previous one.
Yeah. The table is set.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm most excited about. I heard a lot of people call in today to Cap and J Hood. I heard people call into Carmen and Yurko today who are they've got the PTSD working. They're very scorned. They're hurt from past years where they don't want to put themselves out there this year because they've just been so hurt before that they don't want to get hurt again, I think. And they're already saying, well, it's just going to be another failure. And I don't think that's the way you can live as a sports fan. This is what will make it sweeter eventually, because of all the years that you have been hurt. When they finally do get it right, whether it's this time or when it will make it all that much sweeter when the quarterback does finally break through.
I can't connect the dots from Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace and Mitch Trubisky to Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and Caleb Williams. I can't. This is a separate situation. It's a different situation. The organization has a different person at the top of the pyramid. I'm not guaranteeing that it's all going to work out. And this is going to be finally the time that we have a franchise caliber quarterback. I can't guarantee you that. But what I do feel confident about is that there's an infrastructure in place that exists now that hasn't been in place for young quarterbacks in the past. Is it perfect? Maybe not, because not everyone's on the same timeline as we would have all liked to have seen. But right now, you've got a young quarterback stepping into a situation that's as enviable as any first overall pick has found himself in the last several decades. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl this year. But my expectation is they're a significantly better team than they were last year, that they'll win more games, and that this kid, by the end of the season, will have played the quarterback position better than the previous quarterback over the last 3 years. Because this guy, I believe, has a higher ceiling, has a better feel for the position overall, and has a better supporting cast. And when you put that all together, my expectation is that you should have significant improvement.
Amen. I put myself out there, even with every new Bears quarterback, basically. I was excited when they got Cordell Stewart.
Oh, really?
What choice do you really have?
That's just a reflex.
The Mike Lennon one was not. I tried to get optimistic about Mitch. Okay, so when they got Mitch, I'm like, hey, maybe this works. When they got Justin, I certainly was excited. When they got Jay, you know how excited I was. I've tried to always start off from a moment of optimism, no matter how many times before that they have failed, because that's what being a fan is all about. And then from there you judge, right? And then their play will dictate. So again, here we are, and because the general manager has made more smart moves than dumb moves, I'm even more optimistic, and I believe in the talent. Now he's got a ball. He's got to spin it. And then now I'll judge based on his performance of play, not because of the nails, not because of his crying, but what he does on the football field. But I start out in a place where I'm like, this could be it. Let's go.
The fan base is divided in some pretty definitive categories. I think there are some people that are just, unbiasedly optimistic for, the reasons we've talked about. There are some that are still huge fans of Justin, and the parting of ways with Justin still stings them. There are some out there that, get on social media and tell you exactly what's going to happen and what should happen, and they're still clinging to wanting to be right. So they're still a little bitter, and hopefully some of that bitterness will wear off before you get to training camp. And I think that there's just another group that is overly cautious because they felt, like you said, they've been burned in the past. My hope is by the time, look, they haven't even drafted anybody yet. My hope is by the time we're up at Hallis Hall watching them in their first training camp practice, that I think the excitement level is going to be through the roof at that point. What ultimately transpires, hopefully it'll be great. But I think that universally, you'll feel like this building momentum of optimism that isn't quite ready to build at the moment.
All right, being a sports fan is about emotions, all right? We all have takes. But being a sports fan, that's why you listen, that's why you watch, that's why you cheer. So hearing that a lot of people believe that this is fait accompli, how do you feel emotionally about Caleb Williams and the Bears basically almost being a done deal?